So I'm asking myself, why at this point are we have to beg Africans in any damn nation for us to be citizens?
The Afropreneur Podcast, a podcast for African entrepreneurs, presents inspiring, innovative, and disruptive entrepreneurs from Africa as they share their lessons, insights, and learnings from their unique entrepreneurial ventures. I'll be your host. My name is Ogweno Stephen. Let's roll.
Right, so picking up from where we left on slavery, so we just gonna continue on that front and tackle the issue of slavery and colonialism and how different these concepts are and have been misconstrued, especially when it comes to ancient Egypt and Kemet, really. Because one of the things that is very significant in terms of the understanding of the concept of slaverism from how normal people understand it now, and as it concerns Kemet and particularly in the time of Egypt, is the biblical reference to it. So one of the things that people don't understand, and I sort of leave that on a cliffhanger, is that that whole concept was very allegorical. It was not actual happenings of the day. It was very allegorical, as there are many allegorical notes in the biblical writings. Sure. So I leave that at hand. And then the other concept about slavery in Kemet was the concept of the slaves themselves working to build the pyramid. But as we began to hint before, it was impossible. You couldn't be able to do this if the people themselves were not willing to do it. Because the level of accuracy, the level of the pinpoint cutting and arrangement of those stones could not allow it to be done on as someone who did not want to do it. And as history says it, people were paid, and there is a lot of documented payments to the so-called slaves. So I leave that as a cliffhanger, and then you come back to it. And then the last concept that I like to talk about is the actual people that were captured as Kemet was expanding, which are the war, we call them war slaves, is what I just put it in brackets. The people who were captured during war. As history also puts it correctly, is that these people would usually be captured as leverage, of course, for the expansion processes, but they would then be integrated into the communities and become part of the Kemet community. So again, going back to this concept of slavery being used as the driving force to build this was not correct and is not correct, and that is where I want you to sort of start from, and then we'll sort of connect it towards the end with a bit of the colonialism and how that came about as well. So,
Okay. Just to spend a short moment on that. See, to me, it's such a... I don't like to discuss things from a position of defense. When there's facts to the contrary. Okay? So first thing, the notion of slavery is the institution, quote unquote, of slavery. Slavery is something that, from my reading, has existed, for thousands of years. Okay, and what is different is the type of bondage, quote unquote, people are in. One, I mean, for example, there is usually, historically, slavery was something that people were put into a position because of their nation, community being subjugated. Okay, so then you're subjugated and you work for us. But there was no. You did not become subhuman. You did not become a person whose life and whose children's lives were eternally held in bondage, et cetera, et cetera. You weren't dehumanized, okay? And that's generally around the world. Until you get to America. Or until you get to what's called the so-called transatlantic slave trade. And there was no trade. Hell, if there was a trade, Africa would be 10 times more wealthy than it was. So that's the first, misnomer.
And sort of cut you there just a little bit, just to bring this point that even the Bible itself, it records that, just as you explained it from other sources that's not the Bible, it also recorded that the people who were captured, that they had the choice, to continue to remain with their so-called master, and that is how they got integrated, or they had the choice to leave. Yes.
Right.
So it was not forced, and they were not subhuman, and they were not mistreated.
And it was for a period.
Yeah, it was for a period of time.
And your children and your children's children.
Yeah.
Right. We're not.
So, all right.
Exactly. Getting back to what were we talking about?
The transatlantic trade.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. So we ain't using that word because there was no trade. Meaning, if there was trade, what would? Okay, you take 50 million people, okay, out of Africa. So what that was really about, and Africa still suffers from it, was being depopulated. There's no, now a few bottles of rum don't get to be trade.
Yeah.
That gets to be something you give people to buy them off, or the guns you bring so that people who are in communities that are under tension can fight each other, and then you can disable.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a divide and conquer. So one of the things that really troubles me so greatly, being here in Kenya, is that I haven't met any I've hardly met any Africans here who have any memory, any concern, any sense of colonial experience, the history of colonial experience, and any resentment. Listen, you in America, black folks remember, and they will let you know. And within a 20-minute conversation, something will come up, and they will say, "Yeah, well, Whitey on the moon."
Yeah.
Meaning we're dealing with stuff here because of white folks. Whereas in Africa, I never hear a negative word about what Europeans have done in terms of the colonial experience, and also I don't see a sense of there being any, not only resentment, but any support or any empathy for the experience of Africans in America or Africans in the diaspora.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm pissed off about it. Now, it hit me recently. I said, this is all this nonsense about African Americans coming to Africa, and there's this stuff about, oh, come, you'll be greeted, come, you'll be able to have a life here, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, and there's 10 countries that they say you can come to. It's nonsense. First thing, Africans in the diaspora, as Africans, deserve to be citizens based on two things. One, what we have contributed to Africa. There would be no free South Africa if it wasn't for us.
Yeah.
Okay? If you look at Ghana, Liberia, East Africa, West Africa, you look at the kind of input that African Americans and African American civil rights movement had on the liberation
of those
movements and the individuals and where they got their training. You know what I'm saying? These people, Lumumba, all these people were involved with progressive Africans from America, meeting with them in London, meeting with Paul Robeson, meeting with all of these progressive Africans in America. Malcolm came. You know what I'm saying? so many others. For what purpose? To be able to bring strength towards the liberation, for the liberation movements that were starting in the 50s and 60s. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, and there's also the so-called missionary movement of African American churches and organizations that have been supportive of Africa. So I'm asking myself, why at this point we have to beg Africans in any damn nation for us to be citizens?
Alright, thanks for listening, and that's a wrap for this episode. For more exciting episodes like this, don't forget to follow our podcast, The Afropreneur Podcast, on all streaming sites, and visit our website at www.ogwenostephen.com. See you on the next one.